Welcome to Third Tuesday Conversation, the ELCA's Youth Ministry Network's monthly podcast. Our goal is to engage in conversations affirming that youth ministry looks a million different ways, in a million different places, and with a million different experiences. My name is Veronica Brito, and I'm coming to you from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And who do we have on our podcast today?
Hey there, it is Jessica Noonan coming to you from Katy, Texas.
And I'm Alex LaChapelle up in Marquette, Michigan. I just love how you ask us who's here like you're just a little unsure. And
we have to remind her. She's
who
like,
else
who are
is
y'all again?
on this podcast?
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
So it's July, and you know, in our conversations, we've talked about the upcoming mission trips and the debriefs of the year, the confirmations and the graduations, and the confirmations that even feel like graduations. But for me in July, it's also, as much as the trips are planned and the things are booked, and I'll be traveling a bit, more than that, July, even August, even June, they start to become preparations for the next year. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, the part that's so important is also just redefining your ministry, both in the ethos and the expectations that it provides. I was reading an article, and it was about imitation versus participation. And the real question that it asked, this article is from Mockingbird. They do journals and they do articles and books and things like that. I really like their stuff. They offer this idea: are you a follower or a fan of Jesus? And I'm just going to leave it out there at that. I'm going to ask you both, how do you kind of define that? And what do you think the answer is? And we've pre-talked this, so you can kind of go from your where we got, or you can start from the, at first glance, hearing that phrase, follower or fan, where do you want to lean?
Oh,
Crickets.
Answer me.
Oh, okay. So when I hear that question, are you a follower or fan? That's the question, right?
That is the question.
It makes me think of a song that that I sang in a youth choir. And it's like, I want to be a follower of Christ. And I want to just be his hands in the world. And I just really love that song. And so when I think, am I a follower or a fan of Jesus? I want to be a follower of Christ. And that song is like really coming into my head. But I think to be a fan is to say, yeah, he was cool and what he did was cool. But to be a follower is to say, even when it's challenging, even when it hurts, I want to follow what Jesus would do, what he would have for my life. And I know it's the way to find peace for me and myself. So I think, yes, I'm a follower. And if someone were to ask me, I would say, yes, I'm a follower of Christ.
Mm-hmm. I think about a fan, right? Like we love going to concerts in our house. So my kids and I, go see, different big artists or whatever. And the things we've done because we're fans, like, stand out in the 100-degree heat for 4 hours before a concert started. So, and that because we were going to be in the very front of the stage, which it was worth it. But people were fainting around us, by the way.
What concert?
Miranda Lambert. And it was amazing because she was amazing.
Sure.
Hey, don't throw shade.
I'm not throwing shade. Miranda Lambert, worth 4 hours, and yeah, it's worth it to almost die for Miranda Lambert.
Yeah, I mean, well, we didn't. We were hydrated, but those were mostly the people that were having adult beverages around us. But I think about people will pay thousands of dollars to see musical artists and stand in line and do all the things. And right, there's a dedication in that. And I also think that fades. It's not always something that stays with you. And actually, when you were talking, Veronica, you know what I thought of? Because we're a fan of the Gilmore Girls in our house. And part of the theme song is right, where you lead. I won't sing it because that's not good. Where you lead, I will follow.
I will follow.
Thank you. Yeah, I was not going to sing it. Yeah. That we can't, Alex can't take us today, friends. But that is like a lifelong, right? Like that's an everyday commitment. And then I hear those words that I think of Ruth and Naomi, and this commitment that Ruth has to Naomi, and your God will be my God, your people will be my people, and goes to a foreign land, a place unknown to her, and she has no status in all of these things, and yet there's this kind of underlying current in the midst of this story that her mother-in-law's God must know something. I'm gonna stick with this lady. But anyways, how about you, Alex? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, you kind of already know a little bit of my thoughts, but the part that's so interesting to me is this idea of following versus fanship. And I would have probably told you follower before this morning, when I was kind of sitting down with my thoughts and kind of trying to like align them all up. And what I found was that the follow part almost endangers me a little bit. And what I mean by that is when I say follower, I feel like it almost puts too much of a pressure on me. And the invitation to be a fan allows me to sit back and let God do the work. But then I also love, because as you talked about fanship, right? You talked about waiting 4 hours, and you think about all the like spending of time and energy and efforts, things like that. And so I think there's not a right answer. More than what I want to think about today with y'all a little bit is that imitation versus participation conversation, especially as I start to prep for next year. I want to talk about a little bit how we preach this, teach this, talk about it at the council level, things like that. Because I think when people are listening to us talk about youth, it used to be that it was a numbers game. Get 50 people. Here's the pizza budget. Here's the games budget. Here's the bowling budget, all those things. Then we switched and it was like, it's not about numbers. And then we got smaller sometimes, right? I definitely feel that in my own experiences of youth ministry, college ministry. We got smaller, and then they went, don't look at the numbers at all. Just trust in the teachings of Jesus. And I don't want to dissuade you from that. The third part for me, though, is something in the middle that says, how do we make sure that we bring people in where they're at? And being a fan of Jesus, you have these quotes, right? And I think it's Gandhi that says, I like your Jesus. I find that I struggle with his followers. And so I wonder sometimes if that imitation of Christ can sometimes put us in a space of comparison that actually is more law-driven than we realize. And so whether follower or fan, I don't think that the words matter as much as the actions. How do we make sure that we're not pitching, especially to our little ones, that they need to be imitators of Christ as much as they need to be fans of Jesus and like what Jesus has done, and let that be like an inspiration? Because I think even in fandom, there's a push to say, be a fan of it and go with it where let it lead you somewhere. How many times have you heard somebody talk about being a fan and something pushes them into the thing that they're passionate about? And I think that's an important piece of this. What about imitation versus participation? How do you look at those two words? And I know I'm putting you on the spot with some of these definitions, but how are you kind of hearing these things and processing some of these questions that have been thrown at you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes the imitation can lead to participation, right? Like fake it till you make it. I mean, leading a life of faith, right? I mean, not every day is like, yay, Jesus. Some days is like, this sucks. God, what's happening here? You suck. Like, you know what I mean? Like not every day is sunshine and bunnies.
Think about a Cubs fan. Not every day is sunshine. You wait 100 years and finally get to the promised land, and then you
I
immediately
mean, that's
suck
true
again.
fandom, right? That's true fandom there. But yeah, I mean, I think sometimes, right? I mean, you talk about, when your faith becoming your own, right? I don't know, I can't remember anything, but the development of your faith, right? When you're young, it is the imitation, right? You're like, oh, well, my parents do this or my grandparents, and I'm going to do that too. And hopefully, eventually, it evolves into, well, no, now my faith is my own, and I'm taking responsibility for that, right? And so I think in some regards, it's a little bit of both in the way our faith develops. But the participation, I think, goes back to that, right? How am I doing this every day, right? How is my faith informing my decisions about money, informing my decisions about how I engage with the world, informing, right? Everything, right? How about you, Veronica?
I agree. I think about when I hear that imitation versus participation, I think about fandom and just how in American culture, US culture, it has become its own thing. So I am a
Mm.
fan of Marvel movies and comics. Okay. So I'm a fan. I watch it when it's on. I go see the movies. I might read the comic. If I'm in the library, I say, oh, look at this, a new Marvel comic. That is just like the imitation. So I'm imitating a true follower of Marvel comics. I'm on the peripheral, okay, on the edge. And so participation to me looks like I'm buying Marvel comics. I'm using my hard earned money to create a room with Marvel toys in it. I'm going to the conventions. I'm dressing like Storm. Okay. And I am taking my children to the Marvel movies. We're visiting Disney. We're going into the Marvel place. And I even named my child, Captain America, something like that. That is true participation. So when we think about our faith, when we think about our belief and our following of Jesus, even above and beyond Christianity, what does it look like to imitation, which means I pay my tithes, I go to church, I take my kid to their confirmation class, I serve food at the shelter, versus participation. What would participation look when you think about that Marvel fandom? Do you have a fandom of your faith? Is your faith a fandom? And it doesn't have to be that extreme, but think about, is your faith a part of the different aspects of your life? Or are you just on the edge? You're like, yeah, I'm a big fan of the church over there. But I don't want to get involved. I'm just over here. And so what does that mean on the inside, right? Then there's like, are you a follower or fan? That kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just think it's so interesting because I love that we're disagreeing on definition a little bit, but also we're all speaking, I think, that same language. Because for me, like, I think that's the piece that I think sometimes we're missing in the conversation, is that fandom, right? It opens the door for some really beautiful stuff. And I think fandom and participation also go hand in hand, but more than this, that ability to say, how are we making sure to have an external process? Have you ever met a fan that brings you into something that you didn't really care about? And all of a sudden you're like, why do I care so much? It happened to me in seminary. I was following Sounders soccer or football. And these two guys had moved to Chicago to be in seminary. And so I came to their house. I started watching games. I followed that train for like 2-3 years, where even though I wasn't with them, I still checked on games. I watched overseas. Like, it was really cool. And I think, how do we create that fandom? Because I think follow sometimes can be the imitation that gets us to participation, but it also can be the rule following. You've got to do these things. And if you don't do these things, then you're not part of this. And I wonder, especially when we're talking about youth and families, where the changing of the guard is that church is not every Sunday all the time. And sometimes it's once a month, and sometimes it's once every couple of months. How do we also encourage them to hold their fandom into the other aspects of life? Because I wonder sometimes, we always ask this question, how many times do you ever talk about your church or invite people into your church? And the invitation is like, once in a great, great while. We heard somebody just talk at our Synod Assembly about this, where it's like some people haven't invited someone to church. It's like 1 in 23 years is like where the invitation numbers lie sometimes. And I was intrigued by that, only to say, but I will invite people to watch a Packer game. I will invite people to go see the Marvel movie. I will invite people to listen to Miranda Lambert. But I don't always invite people to participate in this thing that I'm actually very much in love with and defines a good chunk of myself.
Yeah. Well, and why, right? Why is that? I mean, people make time for the things that matter to them. Mm-hmm. And, I think sometimes our failure to invite people into our faith and our fandom of Jesus, because the things that we offer as faith communities is boring. I mean, and not that it's all about like making it exciting, I mean, it's not a movie or a theater event, right? And at the same time, right, does it really matter, right? I think when we're doing things in our churches that matter to people, they will invite others, right? If they are connecting with each other, if they are finding ways to use their gifts, that they are aligned around common purpose and values as a faith community, and they see how that's being lived out in real ways, then people get excited about that. I mean, I see that in my work with churches all the time. And I think it's the same thing with youth ministry, right? We don't have to be the church down the street. I mean, I would get that all the time. Well, why don't we do this like so-and-so? They have, a band on Wednesday nights. And I'm like, well, good for them. That's just not what we do, right? We did other things that were meaningful, that attracted students and they attracted their friends. And that just wasn't one of the things, What were you going to say, Alex?
I think I was going to make a Miranda Lambert conversation, but no, yeah. And I think that's the hardest part too, because in this conversation of participation, imitation, we sometimes get sucked into participation has to be a numbers conversation, but also it's placing, I think it's about like looking at your schedule of the year and recognizing like, and obviously I was telling you guys about this centrifugal conversation where if we're going to look at the church and God as a circle, right? Is it the circle that spins and sucks you more into yourself or pushes you more out? And I think for me, that's also part of it, is making sure that you're not inviting students and not inviting families and not inviting yourself into an idea that Christ alone means I'm alone, versus Christ alone can be a conversation about I'm not alone. And I think being able to teach that, preach it, and also put it on the forefront of leadership's mind to say, why do we do what we do? Have we re-debriefed any of the things we did last year and said, what was the true effect of it? What was the message it sent out? Because I think sometimes even when you put out your stuff, right, you recognize that it says, all the members should come to, and it doesn't say invite everyone to, because somebody had it in their mind that this is a members only event. And you go, ooh, country club vibes. And how do we kind of change that image and have those conversations? And I think that it's these kind of theological conversations that sometimes help us when we are thinking about the new year to say, what fits? This is also a good conversation where you start to say things like mission statement, vision statement, core values. They should be analyzed and repeated so that people don't lose track of what core value is this holding up to? What vision are we presenting, and does it actually align?
And we know that motivation is tied to values. So, what is your congregation setting forth as their values? Um, in addition to, being believers in God and in Christ and following the tenets of Christianity and of our ELCA, other than all of that, what are the core values of your congregation? And then let that be a guiding point in setting that motivation for for people to invite others, motivation for the congregation to uplift youth ministry as a part of the church, not just on the outside, on the edges. Oh yeah, we also do youth ministry. I think they went somewhere last summer. I don't remember. So, uplifting those young people in your church to say, this is our value. This is what we value. And we're going to put our time and our effort and our fandom into what we value. But everybody has to agree to it, because that's when you have a scattered church that doesn't going in different directions. And so I've seen it myself. And so, I'm always a fan of a church that has a very visible, meaningful mission and vision. And then what do they hold up as their core values? And I think that that's something that we want people to join our bandwagon, but we don't have enough strength behind what we say and what we do and what we believe. It all has to kind of come together. And I think that's what draws people in. Just to and also I wanted to say about being authentic and being realistic and saying our church has been getting smaller every year, and not just to throw our hands up and say, well, this is just how it is. People don't believe anymore. That's not true. Many of the studies say people do believe. They still believe, but they need to see that this institution of a church, which most of the unchurched, they don't know the difference. They're like Catholic, Lutheran, whatever. I don't know. So we have to show them why we're different, what we believe in, and then invite them to join us in this joy. You're going to get some of this joy. But, we want you to come in and get it, because people find joy in Marvel stories. That's why they love the storytelling. They love the costumes. They love feeling like the good guy wins and this happens. And guess what? Guess what happened? Somebody came back from the dead and ascended. Okay. So we got the best stories. What are you doing now? Come on.
It.
Well,
so that's just how I feel, is that I don't think we're telling our story enough. And I think we need to have a message that people will be like, wow, I never thought about that. Let me go visit that church.
Yep. I tell you, the churches that I've been on staff at, the churches I've been a part of, the churches that I work with all over the country, when they can get real clear about those values, and we talk about it like as your values as a tree. The roots are really your core beliefs, right? And so, like, what does it mean to be a Lutheran Christian, right? What are the things there that are distinct? And then the branches as your core convictions, right? What are the key values in your specific congregation, right? And those shift. They don't stay the same all the time. And then the leaves are really the core practices, right? How do I live out what we believe? And when there is alignment and really practice of those things, and we make decisions based out of that, momentum builds, right? It gives you direction and focus, and you can tell the story about your church that values inclusivity and welcome. And this is the way that shows up. It's seen. It's not just on a wall, on a poster, or on the bulletin, right? It's actually lived out. I mean, and you're right. I mean, it's part of being real clear about what your story is as a congregation, and also, right, about your youth ministry. I'm telling you, when we did that work early on in one of the congregations I worked at a long time. And then we started making all the decisions about that with teams of people, by the way. So include people, because people support what they help create. It was amazing, the things that happened, and I'm not saying from a number standpoint, but from the metric of lives changed, of relationships forged, that I still see playing out like 20 years later. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're reminding me, when I was in high school, I remember there were two words: orthodoxy, orthopraxy, and it's not that one or the other is really standalone-ish as much as what you learn matters, but what you do matters. And if you do something, if you don't do the thing that you say, right? My mom's favorite phrase was "do as I say, not as I do," and usually is her own language, but it was a suggestion of, you know better. But also, I think we're getting that right now with the church, especially when people don't know how to separate us. Then they're looking at all the youth groups and looking at all the churches, and they're saying they don't do what they say. And so how do you invite people into that space? And I think you said it best, like create that tree image, and maybe it's covenants, right? As much as those are kind of considered silly things we do at camp or on youth trips, covenants also allow us to have that conversation. And you can covenant with anybody. It can be a council. You can covenant in a youth group before a trip, but it also allows you to start with a core value. What are our core values? And if you can make your core values Lutheran or Christian in a way that allows people to make a connection when they get to the end of the tree, that's the beauty, right? Then you move into the, what are the core facets, and into the, what are we going to do for the year? What are we going to do on the trip? If you can make bowling invitational because it comes down into your all are welcome, if you can make the pizza party an all are welcome pizza party, then these things start to make more sense. And the students also start to recognize we aren't just skipping out on pizza. We're skipping out on the ability to be an inclusive community. And I think that's where this stuff starts to really grow. And if you've come to the table with a list of why, also for those who might be fighting in the budget game, and you say, this is why we do this, versus I'm sick of throwing pizza, I'm sick of throwing games at all this stuff, and you're not showing me what it's doing. Maybe July is the time to make a list of everything that was done in the year and where it actually connected to the faith of the congregation and the faith statements that exist with it. This is also, I think, where storytelling becomes huge for getting those students input to tell you a story. Yeah. We had a couple students come back from a trip, and they weren't my students, but I was with them on the trip. And then I was talking to their pastor, and he goes, so the students had a great time on the trip with y'all, and now they want to host an event in June. And so now, end of June, we're trying to put this thing together because we have two students and an adult chaperone who are fired up about trying to create what they saw and trying to own that, they can do it too. And I think that's that participatory part where it's this is us. It's living and breathing, right? It changes every year because whoever's sitting in the circle brings their viewpoint, their itinerary, but also their experiences.
Mm-hmm. I love it. What a great conversation today.
Yeah. Well, and I would end too just by saying it's Ascension, not Sunday, we're doing it on Sunday, but it's Ascension coming up. And I love this image of a Christ that leaves, but not to leave behind, which I think sometimes is where we get our theological differences, but a Christ who leaves us with a lasting impression that we actually are participatory in what's going on in the world, and that the heaven can wait because we're creating heaven on earth. And so I think the invitation in this is also to just keep thinking, processing how it is that God has invited you into these processes, and how it is that you're going to invite other people, both your young people, your families, but also that leadership. Who's that person that's sitting on the sidelines that just needs an invitation? And I'm not always the best at this. So I say this to myself to say, get on the horn, Alex, and sit down and draw that tree and start thinking about how to pitch that idea so that people say, how could we not do this? Versus why would we do this? Which I hear actually quite a bit in some of my situations. Why would you do that? That seems like a waste of money, a waste of time. versus someone saying, oh my gosh, when you say it like that, where do we sign? And you start to hear things like, I want to be a part of that. And if you can get some of that energy going, you're gonna see an interesting fall when you come to the table saying, here's the theological repercussions of what we do, which sounds ridiculous, but also it comes across not by saying it like that, but by saying, this is my hopes. And I wonder if you have these hopes too. Anything else you want to throw in before we wrap?
No, I think that was really good.
Yeah,
And just some
super
inspiration to get you all of our beautiful listeners, get you ready for fall and get you through a summer of dreaming and thinking and just holding up that light of Christ and saying what's possible and how can we really do to make that. If you need some resources, I'm going to tell you in a little bit about some resources from the network. But it's hard out there for volunteers, all my volunteers, whoop, whoop. Yes. And that, having our families, working our full-time jobs, and then going and giving our all to the glory of Christ. So some resources coming up soon that you can check into. But thank you, Alex, for leading us down this conversation. This is something that will continue throughout the year. But we love to hear the feedback of all of our listeners. So, you can hit us up and tell us what you think about what we talked about today.
I love it. Thanks, Veronica and Alex. So before we go, here are a few quick announcements and reminders. A reminder that as Network Plus members, you have access to Martin's List. Martin's List is a resource sharing website, and right now it has 500 different resources that have all been created by children, youth, and family volunteers and professionals working in congregations just like yours. If you're looking for a retreat curriculum or a Bible study or an activity for the season of Pentecost, which is, well, that was already happening by July, our resources like this, go to martinslist.com, log in and do a search. You're going to have to adapt it for your context, but that's the case for everything. And if you write or create something, be sure to share it on Martin's List as well, so others can benefit from your work. And if you're a fan of podcasts like this one, check out Faith Listens. This is a new podcast that is fresh out of the gate. It's from the network's Formation Co-op. So this is a limited series, and we're talking about the different things the co-op has been learning as it works with congregations on a new framework for ministry with young people. You can search Faith Listens wherever you get your podcasts, or go to elcaymnet.org/Faith Listens. And thanks to all of you who are members of the network. Your membership makes things like the Third Tuesday Conversation, Oasis, Connect Journal, and Formation Co-op, and Martin's List, and Extravaganza, and much more possible. If you're not a member of Network, we encourage you to join. Our memberships are what make all of this possible. We're grateful to be a community that cares for this ministry. Thanks so much for listening. New podcasts will be released on the third Tuesday of every month. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can receive them as they come out and share it with your friends. And before I do our final announcement, I wanted to remind you guys, August 1st is when registration will open up for the Extravaganza coming up in 2026. It will be in St. Louis. So we hope to see you guys there for that. And finally, thanks to Paul Amlin, the 3TC producer, for his work. Have a great everyone, and look to our next episodes being released on the third Tuesday next month. This is Jessica signing out.
Veronica signing out. Wear your sunscreen.
And Alex signing out saying, I'm a fan of you, and I'm excited to see what you do.